Hey y'all, welcome to this week's show. Let's just jump right in it. As usual, we will start with a passage from my spring foraging cookbook, and it's actually one of our best medicinal herbs as well. In this case, I'm going to give you a little medicinal information, but I'm also going to get really into the culinary uses of one of my favorite herbs and wild edible plants. And then we'll get into the weeds and grasses book, and I've got a really interesting one there that well, you're gonna like this one. Okay, so anyway, let's start with mints. Now, probably I would say mints were probably the first herb I was taught to identify when I was getting into herbal medicine. You know, when I was 15 or so, and the Hicks family was showing me how to identify herbs and everything. Mints are, well, it's a large family. They're most of our culinary herbs. I'd say at least half of our culinary herbs fall into the mint family. The others pretty much fall into the Apiaceae family. Like on the one hand, we've got mint and basil and oregano and all that. And then on the other hand, you know, we've got our caraways and corianders and parsleys and all that. Interestingly enough, they all have medicinal value. All of these plants really began as ways for people to preserve food and to prevent, food poisoning. Long before refrigeration or freezing or anything like that, the way people preserved food was with salt and drying it and using a lot of herbs from those two families. Now, the mint family, of course, is a very safe family, very easy to identify. All members of the family have square stems and opposite leaves. That means two leaves sitting directly opposite each other, and they just kind of go up like a ladder from there. Okay, mints are, for the most part, very aromatic. There are a few that have some herbal use that aren't aromatic, like horse mint. I think we mentioned horse mint recently. It's a very large variety, does not have a lot of scent. But then, bee balm or monarda, also sometimes called horse mint or lion's tail. There are many folk names for it. Lion's tail can be a different plant as well. But anyway, very strong in its volatile oils. Of course, in the mountains where I grow, we have wild mints. The apple mint is very common. It is a nice, mild, very slightly scented mint with a very soft, almost like a mullein textured leaf. Very easy to identify. We have water mints, which are very, very strong. Pennyroyal. Water mint and pennyroyal can actually be a little dangerous. We'll talk about that in a minute. We have the mints that were brought in by the settlers, by Europeans, like spearmint. Now, I don't know if there was a wild spearmint here, but I do believe that like 90% of the spearmint I find in the wild got out of somebody's garden. What they always say is be careful when you plant mint because it spreads so. I love mint. I use mint almost daily. Absolutely wonderful. Peppermint, though, is somewhat unique. Peppermint is a very hybridized type of mint. It is the one with the strongest of the, I guess you would say, the culinarily used mints in terms of edible mints. We use it medicinally as well, but it's one of the strongest common mints because it's high in those volatile oils, and it actually needs to be taken from cuttings. Sometimes in catalogs you'll see seeds for peppermint. Don't really even bother. More than likely, you're just going to get a very kind of middle of the road mint. Get a peppermint plant and take cuttings from it. Very, very easy to propagate mint. You can take a cutting and literally just wrap it in a wet paper towel until you're ready to put it in some moist soil, and it's probably going to root. It's that easy. Or you can divide out mints. I mean, they spread by runners. Mints are so very, very easy. And I mean, far too often mints are just considered a culinary herb, and specifically, we tend to think of mint in terms of like peppermint candy or chocolate chip mint ice cream, which I know some people don't like it. That's actually one of my favorite flavors. I love the flavor of mint, but mint really has a lot of uses. Like I said, it's related to basil, it's related to oregano, it's related to so many of the like marjoram and savory and so many of the culinary herbs we use. So I'm going to give you a little bit of both. Really, the mints that we think of today have been bred for hundreds, if not thousands of years, honestly. I mean, these are some of the oldest herbs in history. We've got wonderful stories about like in ancient Greece, they were thought to be, favored by certain gods. We've got biblical stories of using mint. We know mint was very popular in ancient Egypt, and it really wouldn't have occurred to our ancestors to use peppermint, for instance. Well, they hadn't really bred peppermint, but say spearmint, which would be the next strongest of the really edible mints, as a flavoring in cookies or candies or gum. Mint flavored gum is a very popular flavor. Mints were really valued for their antimicrobial value and their soothing effect on sore throats and coughs. In ancient Greece, they would scrub down tables with fresh mint before entertaining guests. That actually helped prevent food poisoning because people ate pretty much directly on the table, but it also made things smell nice. Mints were used in religious ceremonies. Mint's one of the few herbs mentioned in the Bible because it was so valuable. It was used as a tithe in the Jewish temple. And mints were especially valuable in earlier eras, but when water was usually not safe to drink. I mean, if you look back in ancient history, our ancestors pretty much drank beer and wine. They did not drink a lot of water because the water was contaminated. Unless there was a fresh spring or a deep well, you didn't know that your water didn't have some fecal bacteria in it. They didn't have modern sewage systems, and you had lots of cattle and everything. And probably the way we got to sort of our modern concept of herbal teas and such were people infusing that water with mint leaves or things like wormwood. And those are probably those two families right there, your sage, your wormwood, and your mints. Probably the first herbs really used by man. When it comes to the Apiaceae family, you have to remember that family also includes poison hemlock. And it's so hard to tell poison hemlock from wild carrot that it would have been a while before our ancestors really got used to using a lot of herbs from the Apiaceae family. Of course, that aromatic scent before people had deodorants and toothpastes and such, they would often chew up the mint or rub it on their skin to make themselves smell better. And that also helped prevent infections to a great deal. Mints have really good antimicrobial properties. And as I mentioned, they were often combined with other herbs to prevent meat from spoiling. And many herbs in the mint family also make really good pot herbs. Now, I wouldn't want to eat like a whole boiled, serving of mint, but using mint actually as we would use some of its cousins like oregano and basil is really nice. I don't think we think about that much in America. Of course, the mints also dry well. It's one of those you don't have to use fresh. And that, made it a very valuable. People could actually dry it, save it, and trade it as an ancient, essentially, form of money. So, along with herbs like this and salt and garlic, that's how our ancestors really survived. It allowed them to drink the water and eat the meats. And if you think, well, I don't really think about this a lot in modern food. Well, think about salami. Think about all the spices and herbs that are in salamis. That goes back literally thousands of years. They were making salamis back in ancient Greece and really probably as far back as like ancient Samaria and Babylon, just using these simple herbs and salt and maybe some garlic, maybe some onions, and that's how they cured their meats. The strongest of the mint family, as I mentioned, that we're going to find in the wild are water mint and pennyroyal. So I'm going to go ahead and give you this caveat, this warning. These mints are so strong in volatile oils they can actually be quite dangerous and should never be used by pregnant women. In fact, pregnant women should not eat like a large handful of fresh mint. It can cause a miscarriage. The same goes for, well, a lot of the common herbs we use, basil even. You think how mild and nice basil is in a pesto. In culinary doses, it's usually fine. In medicinal, highly concentrated doses, they can be quite dangerous, actually. If you've ever taken an oil of oregano capsule, that's sort of a natural kind of antibiotic we use. You know how it kind of burns your stomach? Those are some seriously volatile oils. And especially when we're talking with the culinary mints, I'd be kind of careful with peppermint. I mean, maybe stick with your spearmint and apple mint if you have a concern. One of the interesting things is the mints are actually responsible for one of the few recorded deaths attributed to herbal medicine in American history. And it was in the early 1900s, a woman tried to use pennyroyal to induce an abortion. She used pennyroyal oil, which, as I said, the oils, which are taken from a distillation process, are incredibly strong. And not only was the baby killed, but so was she. She bled out of every orifice. So I don't want to overstate the danger of these herbs in their natural state, but in tinctures and in especially essential oils, they can actually be a reason for concern. So I usually use spearmint and apple mint. As I said, it grows all over the place around me. Widely planted and propagated by the settlers, and it was apple mint actually gets its name because it actually does have a slight green apple scent to it, but it was often grown in apple orchards. The mints are somewhat effective at driving away certain bugs that might infest your crops and such. So that was a really common use for it. Now we have so many mints, and you're going to really want to experiment with it. Like I said, people have been hybridizing and picking out these like choice varieties and breeding them to get these scents. There's lemon mint. And lemon balm is also in the mint family, but this is actually a mint that has a lemony scent. There's chocolate mint. I mean, it's crazy the stuff they've come up with. And of course, there's that wonderful Thai basil, and I mean, there's so many members of this family, but most people these days really only do associate mints with candies and maybe alcoholic drinks like the mint julep or the mojito. Now, I really don't like mint julep, so I'm not going to give you a mint julep recipe. A mojito is actually pretty good. In fact, I wouldn't turn that down. But I do prefer more savory things, unless I want actually, some mint chocolate chip ice cream, or I love those Andes mints, the little mint chocolates. I can wipe out a box of those in the blink of an eye. Or Junior Mints. You remember the Junior Mint from Seinfeld? And actually, you remember at the end of that episode, they talked about how the guy had a bad infection from the surgery when Kramer dropped a Junior Mint in his wound while observing the surgery, and then he had a remarkable recovery. Well, probably would not happen with a Junior Mint, but mints have been used throughout history to prevent infections and were often used to dress wounds. So as crazy as that Seinfeld episode was, and I'm a huge Seinfeld fan, and as implausible it would be with a Junior Mint, had it actually been mint, there could actually have been something to that. Of course, the foreign matter in the wound being sown, would likely cause an infection one way or another. But in that case, a mint oil or tincture would have been actually very useful. But getting back to the savory aspects, it's really amazing how well mint pairs with tomatoes, garlic, onions, and really all other members of the mint family. especially oregano and basil and such. It really goes well with meats and cheeses. Now, I know if you haven't tried it that way, you may think I'm crazy, but give this a shot. The volatile oils of mint act as a flavor enhancer. They bring the scent of the dish to the nose, essentially up the back of the palate, to where a lot of our taste actually lies in the nose. You know, you think about when you get a cold and you can't taste things. Well, that's because the nose is congested or inflamed. Mint provides a slightly bitter balance to sweeter flavors. So when I'm using like tomatoes and onions, which have a nice sweetness to them, a little bit of mint actually counters that. A lot of times when I make, well, all the time, anytime I make like shrimp creole, I've given you that recipe before. You know, it's a tomato-based sauce, and it's got a sweetness to it, especially with the onions and everything you put in there. A little bit of mint not only makes it more aromatic, but makes it just balances the sweetness. It makes it more interesting. One thing it pairs especially well, I mean, I would say remarkably well with mint, is eggplant. Now, eggplant has a natural bitterness to the vegetable. You know, we can soak that bitter water out and takes away some of the bitterness. You put the mint in there, and it just brings out flavors from eggplant like you wouldn't believe. And that was a use very well known to ancient Greece. You go into Italy, and their eggplant parmesan is going to be usually using a mint relative, oregano and basil. But really going back in ancient history, it probably would have been more mint. In fact, a lot of, especially the British herbalists, and well, no, this actually starts with like Pliny the Elder and oh gosh, a lot of the ancient Greek writers, they thought basil might actually be a little dangerous. They thought it could actually drive a person insane or damage their brain. I mean, all kinds of weird stuff. So even back then, you know, mint was really probably the most preferred member of the family, even though, you know, basil smells fantastic. But one of the best ways to use mint as a savory herb to begin with is in a fresh salad. You know, where I live, mint's always one of the first spring plants to pop out of the ground, along with parsley. And I always grab a handful of mint and a handful of parsley because they're usually up at the same time. And I toss them into just about everything. Soups, sauces, roasted meats. Such a great combination with roasted meats. They're not only a flavor enhancer, but they're full of vitamins and medicinal properties. Chives are also common about that time, so I'll often include chives or spring onions or ramps especially. Oftentimes I will just make a salad of those herbs. Just grab some member of the allium family, handful of mint, handful of parsley, anything else that looks good that I want, and just toss it together and just make a little salt and pepper, and just a simple salad dressing, a little vinaigrette, a little olive oil, wine vinegar, bit of mustard to bring it together into emulsion, salt and pepper, and just toss the salad together. And it probably is a little bit of a strong salad for most folks. I mean, I actually really like these flavors, and I like those strong flavors. Especially if I was fixing a salad like that for a pregnant woman, I'd cut way back and mix in some fresh lettuces and other spring greens, and just use that more as a seasoning, So I'm going to give you the recipe, though, just kind of balancing this recipe with more mild ingredients so that it would be more safe for other people. And this is safe for a large salad, maybe 2 people, or a side salad for 4. Just a handful of fresh picked mint. Just the leaves, the top leaves. If you pick the top leaves, everything in the mint family will actually start branching from that place. So the way to get more mint or more basil or whatever is to just pick the top floret of leaves, and it will start branching out and just multiply like crazy. Handful of freshly picked parsley, maybe a half handful of freshly cut chives or other green allium. A big bunch of mild sweet salad greens, such as young lettuces or spinaches or a mix of that. And, if they're up, and they usually are in the spring, a few edible flowers like violets. Violets are one of the first things that come up. If the nasturtiums, that would be a little bit later, but if they're starting to bud out, they're nice and peppery, I'd throw those in there. Maybe some, radishes are one of the first things that come up. So finely sliced radish. Carrots are much later in the season for me, but if I had some fresh carrots, I'd probably grate them. Don't want them too chunky in the salad. Or anything just kind of sweet, a little peppery, a little crunchy, just give you a nice bite. Fresh garden peas would be absolutely fantastic. Those nice spring garden peas. Cherry tomatoes, if you got them coming in. Celery tops are an absolute must for me. I love celery. Celery is also in the Apiaceae family. It always goes well with parsley. Salt and pepper to taste, splash of lemon juice, dressing of your choice. Like I said, vinaigrette would be good. Another option, if you want to make it a little more filling, a little more rich, and actually to kind of balance out those really, what do you call them? Not piquant. There's a word for it. Well, anyway, those really sharp flavors of the mint and parsley. Do a blue cheese dressing and some sliced boiled eggs and any other cheese you want to add. Maybe crumbled bacon. I throw bacon into everything that I can. Or ham, sliced ham would be very nice. You could do a poached egg. Okay, just lightly poach your egg, put it on top of the salad, and do the vinaigrette. And when you start breaking up the egg and eating it together, the vinaigrette and the egg yolk will turn into a natural mayonnaise. I like to do that a lot. Really good. If I did that, I'd probably put a little Parmesan cheese and ham. I think that combination, fantastic. Another good way to get people eating mint is with soft scrambled eggs or an omelet. Any kind of way you're going to do eggs with cheese. And this time I just take some mint, parsley, and chives, and they pair so well with egg, it's really hard to go wrong with that combination. Cook the eggs any way you like. I like soft scrambled eggs. They say everyone has a favorite way to eat eggs, but I have a ton, right? So usually I just cook simple soft scrambled eggs, usually in some bacon fat, but you could do a French-style omelet. It's basically just scrambled eggs unscrambled. you basically put your scrambled egg in the pan and kind of fold it over and drop it onto a plate while it's still hot. And it's got this, it looks sort of like a football shaped. And then just kind of cut it open and put your fresh herbs in there, maybe a little grated cheese. Or you can do it with scrambled eggs. Same thing, nice herbs and a little bit of cheese, and really good. And of course, I've given you recipes for frittatas and all kinds of stuff like that. Ingredients on this, I'd say maybe 2 eggs per person, because you're going to make a meal out of it. Maybe some people like 3 eggs at a time. I usually have some bacon or something on the side, so I'm going to go with 2 eggs. Fresh mint and parsley and chives, or any substitution you like. Little milk, little cream, butter, salt and pepper to taste. One of my favorite cheeses to use with this would be Chev, a tangy goat cheese. Your choice. Brie and camembert are very nice. If you have a little bit of brie or camembert left over, that is so good with this herb combination. Swiss cheese is always perfect with eggs, but so is cheddar. Cheddar goes really well with herbs. I think most people have never tried cheddar with herbs, but anything from celery leaf to mint to any of this, caraway seeds even, just kind of brings out the aromatic flavors, just bring out the taste of that cheese. But I'm going to go with Chev, just saying this example, because it's soft and tangy and it melts really easy, and it just really combines well with the herbs. So if possible, use fresh eggs from your backyard, of course, right? And if you do use fresh eggs, you might find cream to be your preference. Older eggs seem to work a little better with whole milk, in my opinion, and it's just because they need a little more liquid. But either way, just break your eggs into a bowl, whisk them together with a splash of dairy, and that's optional. If they're good fresh eggs, the dairy is absolutely optional. I like it. Just cook gently in melted butter. We're talking like medium heat. Don't get the pan too hot. And you want to kind of stir them to get nice large curds. If the pan's too hot, what's going to happen is the eggs will separate and become watery. That's really probably the biggest mistake people make with scrambled eggs, is cooking them in too hot a pan. Sometimes they turn into just basically mashed up fried eggs, and other times they actually kind of break up and this kind of water starts coming out, and they're just nasty. Nobody wants to eat eggs like that. Now, a true egg purist only seasons their scrambled eggs in the pan just before serving or on the plate. They claim that the salt can alter the texture of the eggs. I've tried it both ways. I don't find it to be any difference at all, really. So I may whisk salt and pepper into the eggs in the bowl and then cook it. Do it how you like. But do wait to add the herbs until the eggs are partially cooked, and the cheese at the end. Get your eggs basically half scrambled, put the herbs in, give them another stir, get them incorporated, and the cheese at the very end. You don't want the cheese to get to the bottom of the pan and start to stick and burn, or trust me, it's easier this way. And I like my eggs soft and creamy, but you cook them however you like. Just don't overcook them. I hate it when people overcook eggs, but top them with the cheese, plate up, and enjoy. You're going to love it. I'm going to give you a couple more. And this is one, mints can be coming in all season. So these last two are not so much spring dishes, but these are ones you're going to want to make, especially in the summer for the first one, and late summer to fall for the second. Ratatouille is not just a Disney cartoon. Of course, it's a Mediterranean dish that is like the perfect way to use a lot of the more abundant vegetables when the summer garden's really coming in. Now, classically, it's a combination of finely sliced zucchini, eggplant, sweet peppers, tomato, garlic, onions, herbs, salt and pepper, lots of olive oil, roast in the oven, and enjoyed with a good glass of wine. It is like the, Southern France, Mediterranean, hot weather dish when you've got so much squash and such coming in that you can't figure out how to use it all. This is like the perfect way to use it. But you use what you like. It's more of a technique than a recipe. So I grow a lot of yellow crookneck squash and white patty pan squash. I prefer those to zucchini. Now, I like zucchini. Zucchini's just fine. If I have some on hand, I'll use it. I think eggplant is a must. I like the flavor of eggplant a lot, and definitely tomatoes. So for the alliums, I'll use any and all. We've talked about all kinds of onions and garlic and shallots and green onions and spring onions and chives, anything I've got on hand. To those veggies, I'll add most anything coming into the garden at the same time that would taste good and work good with the textures. And one of my favorites is artichoke hearts. Mild greens are really nice. Green beans are good. Really fresh bean greens. Asparagus is wonderful. Now, none of this is traditional. Like I said, and asparagus is more of a spring vegetable, but, it may, depending on where you live, it may be coming in the same time as some of these others. The stems of broccoli and cauliflower are also both good. What you'd want to do is peel them, blanch them, slice them. Fresh sweet corn cut off the cob, always a favorite. Any number of forage plants would be nice, but I do kind of think of ratatouille as sort of a use up the garden surplus, kind of thing. I'll add any mushrooms I have on hand, and summer is oyster mushroom season, big time around here. Mint, like I said, rampant in the garden in summer, so I include a lot of mint, a lot of parsley, and any Mediterranean herbs I have on hand, such as oregano, marjoram, thyme, basil, rosemary, even a little bit of lavender. Lavender is, of course, aromatic. It's slightly bitter. Don't use too much, but it can really, as they used to say, give the dish a college education. I mean, a little bit of lavender just gives it that kind of herbs de Provence type flavor that's really going to impress people. You can mix everything together and just make it like a casserole. That's not traditional. What's actually traditional is to slice everything and arrange it in alternating layers and make just this like really pretty dish that's going to take out of the table. That's up to you. If you have time to do it, arrange everything in a real pretty way. If you don't, just chop it all up, toss it in a casserole dish, season with salt and pepper, dress with olive oil, and roast in a hot oven until brown and fully cooked. I think that's as simple as it gets, really. It's just like basically a fresh vegetable and herb casserole. And, being a little less traditional, I think a little bit of white wine in there. And actually a little bit of Worcestershire sauce, depending on what vegetables I've got in there. And I do just mean a dash for taste. I'm not talking enough to really taste it. Soy sauce is actually really interesting. A little dark mushroom soy sauce. A lot of these same vegetables, the squashes and such, are very good in stir fries and such. So just a touch brings out a different flavor, another depth of flavor. And of course, I love hot peppers. So I might chop up a lot of hot peppers in mine, whatever I've got on hand. And really some good olives just to put on the dish at the end. That just kind of makes it for me. I mean, especially if I've got some cured olives. And like I said, I really do love it with corn. And if I don't put corn in the dish, I'll usually have a roasted buttered ear on the side. To me, it's just like this wonderful summer, like a hot evening dish. Get you a glass of white wine or maybe a Pinot Noir, something, not too tannic. And it's really, really very good. Very good. And lastly, I'm going to give you one of my most controversial recipes. And as I said, this is more of like a later season recipe for me, but it is so good. Now, my late uncle was a mayonnaise fanatic. He put mayonnaise on everything. And this is what people take issue with in this recipe because it's so untraditional. He came up with a way of doing eggplant parmesan using mayonnaise. Now, don't freak out. Don't freak out, Jerry. It is so good. It really is. Now, it may not be your taste, but I really love it. And having fallen in with that like mint, tomato, garlic, eggplant combination through Greek food, they use a lot of mint with eggplant. You know, growing up, there was a Greek family that had a little diner, and I really fell in love with their food. I did a little tinkering with it and started putting mint in this version of eggplant parmesan, and it is a remarkable dish. It is not traditional Italian. I know that. I'm not claiming it is, but every Italian I've served it to has said it's like the best eggplant parm they've ever had, like as good as their grandmother's, and they don't know why they can't get eggplant parm as good anymore. So I don't know what their grandmother's secret was, but I know what my secret is, and I'm going to share it with you. So ingredients. Now I usually make a huge pan of eggplant parm. I will literally have it 2 meals a day for like a week or two because I think it's fantastic. Just I'm not going to give you really proportions, just kind of alter it, to how much you want to make. You can also use any eggplant in this. I usually use purple eggplants, like the big purple eggplants, because I know what to expect with them. That's what I grew up eating. But if you want to use Asian eggplants or any kind of different eggplant, hey, go for it. Whatever. You want some crushed tomatoes? Now these can be straight from the garden, or I usually use canned crushed tomatoes. So like I said, for me, this is a later season dish. Onion, garlic, mint, oregano, basil, parsley. Breadcrumbs. I always say make your own breadcrumbs. Just take your bread, toast it, crumble it up, especially if you got good homemade sourdough. But if you want to use store-bought breadcrumbs, yeah, totally up to you. Mayonnaise of your choice. Homemade is certainly better, and I've told you how to make homemade mayonnaise so many times, I'm not going to do it again. But if you want to get store-bought mayonnaise, I'd just stay away from the salad dressing type. Go with something like Hellman's or Duke's or whatever is your choice. Olive oil, grated Parmesan cheese or Pecorino Romano or whatever you happen to like. Asiago is always good, but Parm, this is supposed to be an eggplant Parm, is more traditional. And it does have more of a nuttiness to it. It's really good. And some mozzarella. The best mozzarella you can get, but don't splurge on it. I mean, you don't need this fancy buffalo mozzarella. Just decent mozzarella. Just try to stay away from like the hard grocery store brick type. Just a nice soft mozzarella. If you can get it, if you have to use the hard mozzarella grocery store brick type, it's still going to be better than not having it. So, instructions. Slice your eggplants into rounds, leaving the skin on. Now, that's the way I do it. Optionally, and especially if it's an older or tough eggplant, which I often use later in the season, I won't peel the whole thing. What I do is peel it off in alternating strips so it looks like striped. That way I get a little bit of the flavor of the peel, but it doesn't get like real chewy and inedible. It's just easier to eat that way. You don't want to leave all the peel on of a tough eggplant, but if it's a tender eggplant, I definitely leave the peel on because it takes less time. Slice them into rounds. We're talking maybe a quarter to a half-inch thick, closer to a quarter. Let's go with a third, whatever, right? Probably as thick as your little finger. That's kind of what I go for. And lightly salt both sides of the eggplant, of the slices, I mean. Stack these between layers of paper towels or tea towels on a plate. Place another plate on top and some kind of weight, and I'll usually use the can of tomatoes as my weight. Allow the salt and pressure to draw out the bitter water from the eggplant. It's going to take a good half hour. That's going to give the eggplant not only a better flavor, but a meatier texture, and you'll be amazed how much water comes out of that. It also, because you're taking the water out of it, makes it easier to fry. Dry each slice of eggplant and put on a light coating of mayonnaise. Dredge or sprinkle on breadcrumbs seasoned with dried herbs and grated Parmesan cheese. So, yeah, that comes already in the store-bought stuff. If you want to buy the store-bought stuff, I'm not going to look down on you. If you make it yourself, just put in some dried herbs and grated Parmesan cheese. Easy as can be, right? Fry each slice in olive oil, and or you can put them on a baking sheet in the oven with a little drizzle of olive oil on the pan and then on top, and they'll brown up just fine like that. You do not have to fry them if you don't want to. Either way, you just want to brown them up. If you do them in the oven, I usually give them a turn halfway through. But if you do them in the pan, I actually have a bad habit of like eating half of them as I fry them. I just grab that, breaded fried eggplant and start, dipping it in marinara sauce and eating it just like that because it's fantastic. Or a horseradish and horseradish sauce, horseradish and mayo. That's really fantastic on there. I've given you that recipe before as well. So once everything is browned up, set it to the side. Now we're going to start making a sauce. We're going to sweat down some finely chopped onions and olive oil with salt. Add crushed garlic when the onions become translucent. Add all your fresh herbs. Your black pepper. I usually add a little crushed red pepper too. I like some spice. When that's come together, stir in your fresh tomatoes. Simmer and season to bake. You cook it down to a nice thick marinara sauce. Spoon a layer of the sauce into a baking or casserole dish. Add a layer of fried eggplant. Top with some grated parm. Repeat. Sauce, eggplant, parm. Sauce, eggplant, parm. Until it's just full and you've used it all up. Cover it the top with more parm and mozzarella. All the mozzarella you got, put it right on top. It's going to kind of melt down into it, especially when you start eating it. Pop in the oven and bake until it's brown and bubbly. Of course, you can add some meat to that, and I think hot Italian sausage is best. I like it spicy. I like the fennel that's in the Italian sausage. I think it adds a layer of flavor. Mushrooms in the sauce make it much better. I love putting mushrooms in there, and I use any mushrooms I have. It doesn't matter if they're store-bought or they're wild mushrooms. I like a bold red wine with this sauce and with this dish, and so I'll usually toss a glass in the sauce too. Yeah, you got to simmer it down a little bit longer, but it's going to bring out more flavor. And I love spinach or even kale, and of course wild greens. You could absolutely alternate a layer of eggplant with any kind of greens that you like. I wouldn't use something like really strong like mustard or collards or something, but anything kind of in a more mild, more sweet variety of greens. Not lettuces, but something more in the spinach or maybe something as strong as kale. No stronger than that. But yeah, you could do a layer alternating in between. Really good. And if I do that, if I add spinach or another green to it, I'll also include a layer of ricotta or cottage cheese on top of the greens. I think that's fantastic. There's something about that combination of ricotta or cottage cheese with the greens, and you probably had that like in a spinach lasagna, right? It just works. I don't know why. It just works. But that's actually kind of one of my signature dishes. All of these are really good. I mean, all of these are really, really good. I use a lot of mint. I use a lot of parsley in my cooking. If you don't give any of them a try, except the mint, I guess if you don't give any of them a try, except the eggplant parm, and even if you leave the mayo out, that's not going to upset me at all. Give it a try one time to see how that combination comes together. I think you're going to really like it. Of course, in a salad or scrambled eggs, it's going to be a lot easier and all. So, but give one of them a try at least. It's going to really impress you, and the health benefits you're going to get from these herbs make well worth any little extra time or effort it takes to cook from scratch, obviously, but it's also going to taste better than anything you're going to get in just about any of even the nicest restaurants. I'm serious. I mean, that's really, really good. Every Italian friend I've had who's tried this has been mind blown. I'm not kidding. And as far as the ratatouille, I mean, I may not do it in the traditional pretty way of lining it all up in the plate and everything, but in the dish, I mean the cooking dish. But I mean, I've served that to some folks that really know some good French food, and they've been pretty mind blown on that as well. The mint just brings out so much flavor. All right, y'all. Now we will turn to our medicinal herb of the week, which, obviously mint is one of the most medicinal herbs, but we're going to focus specifically on the medicinal properties of verbena. Now, there are many plants in they're called verbena or in the same family as verbena. I'm going to try to tell you each time which one I'm talking about so you understand this is specific to this plant of this family, essentially. Now, the Thomsonians in early American herbal medicine made use of Verbena hastata, and they just called it either blue vervain or Vervain. And I suppose this one is probably more native to the New England states, and that's where the Thomsonians were based. But Dr. Thompson wrote, "It is a well-known herb growing very common. It ranks next to the emetic herb for an emetic." Now he was talking lobelia. "And may be used for that purpose either alone or combined with thoroughwort." Emetic means it makes you throw up. "It is good to prevent a fever in its first stages. The herb has been used with considerable success in consumption, curing cases which other remedies failed to cure. It may be used in a tea made of the dry herb, or prepared in a powder like the emetic herb or lobelia. The ordinary blue vervain," again, that is Verbena hastata. "This is the ordinary blue vervain common to all sections of his territory." So again, he was based in Vermont, and that again is Verbena hastata. "An ounce of the herb makes a strong infusion to be used freely in old cases of ague or fevers. It is intensely bitter and has a strong influence upon the liver and stomach. Made into a syrup with twice its amount of wahoo and butternut, it constitutes a valuable preparation for chronic constipation and malarial difficulties." Now, wahoo is the euonymus we talked about recently, very recently. Not much used in herbal medicine anymore because it is somewhat toxic. The plant is a bitter, and the butternut's in the hickory family. So anyway, the plant is a bitter, a relaxing, stimulating nervine. In a hot infusion, it influences a good circulation toward the capillaries and soothes the nervous system throughout. The liver, gall, ducts, and bowels are all influenced by it. It gives favorable results in biliousness, periodic bilious attacks, and is somewhat anti-periodic. Boiling destroys considerably its stimulating quality and leaves it a relaxing nervine. The American eclectic materia medica also used Verbena hastata, also New England based. Now, this hastata, or the blue vervain, will show up in my area of the Appalachian Mountains, but it's not common throughout the South. They made a tincture of it, and they said the therapeutic action: Verbena is emetic, diaphoretic, so makes you throw up, good for fevers, expectorant, and tonic. Gets some mucus out of your lungs and good for the stomach. As an emetic, it may be used in the form of a strong decoction in doses of 1 ounce every 10 minutes until vomiting. It forms a very efficient emetic and may be prescribed with advantage in a sick headache arising from indigestion or debility of the stomach, in fevers, and whenever a mild emetic is indicated. Now, you have to know about the eclectics and the Thomsonians. They were both very big on emetics. The vomiting would help break a fever, and there were a lot of epidemic fevers going around. But again, this is before refrigeration and pasteurization, all that kind of stuff. People often had bad water and bad food. Or, being in a new country, this is, 1700s, they ate something they didn't quite know what it was and accidentally poisoned themselves and had to throw up. So these were very, very important aspects of their medicine, far less important to us in modern times, but still very useful to know. It may be used with a prospect of success during the forming stages of fevers, but particularly in intermittents, a short time before the paroxysm. That's malaria. Intermittent means basically malaria fever that comes with a paroxysm or seizure or spasm. So pretty serious stuff. In this case, it should be given to the extent of producing full vomiting and perspiration. If administered in small and frequent doses in the form of a cold infusion during the intermission, it acts as a tonic and antiperiodic, and not unfrequently affects a permanent cure. So they actually believe taken in small doses as a cold tea could eventually cure the fevers caused by malaria. As a diaphoretic and expectorant, it is very beneficial in colds, coughs, and diseases of the respiratory organs. It is even said by some, though the authority is questioned, to have cured many cases of consumption or tuberculosis. Scrofula is another disease which it is said to have proved highly useful. It is often prescribed in obstructions of the glandular system arising from cold. It is also highly recommended in amenorrhea and obstructed and suppressed lochia. In the former complaint, the tincture, decoction, or extract may be used. The extract, when combined with sulfate of iron and gum of myrrh, constitutes a very good emmenagogue pill, means it brings on menses. The extract and sugar have been melded together and used as a lozenge in some cases. We have found a warm infusion, a very superior agent in suppressed lochia. Some recommend it as an anthelmintic, meaning gets rid of worms, and others speak favorably of it in calculous and nephritic conditions, kidney and bladder stones. The cold infusion in small doses promotes the appetite and favors digestion. Another one, Verbena urticafolia, that's nettle leaf vervain, is sometimes employed, but is a very inferior substitute for the preceding species. Schoaf states that it has been used in poisonings from Ruus toxidendron, boiled in milk and water with the inner bark of the white oak applied topically, so used for poison sumac topically. Now, researchers of the Southern Fields and Forests list under Vervain in general that it's emetic, expectorant, and sudorific. The extract is pronounced valuable in intermittent fevers, obstructed menstruation, in scrofula, and visceral obstructions, and expectorant and palliative, and said it was good for congestion and bronchial affections. Of the nettle leaf vervain, this is when he starts with, it's Verbena urticafolia. That means nettle leaf. Nettles are urticaria, so urticafolia. Common in damp soils and collected in the vicinity of Charleston by him. This is the one that wrote the book. It was listed in the U.S. dispensatory saying, and that was a pharmaceutical manual, boiled in milk and water combined in the inner bark of white oak, advantageous use in poisoning from sumac. So same thing. Now, of the Verbena hastata, also he found it in South Carolina. Like I said, it does get somewhat into my region, but not all that common. And it may, he said he found it more in South Carolina and Georgia. Maybe it is more common around the coast. It could likely be the case, actually. He said it is more bitter than the European species and is said to be emetic. The plant is described by the Cherokee physicians as an emetic inferior to the Indian physic, so not quite as strong as what they call the Indian physic. A decoction of the dry or green herb or a powder is prescribed like lobelia, and that's, again, what we're talking about, what the Thomsonians started with. A decoction of the root is used to check fevers when given in the early stages, and the plant should be examined. Now, Verbena albulacea grew in the middle districts of South Carolina and Georgia, so more of a Piedmont plant. He said it contained a very acrid mucilage and had, to the best of his knowledge, had no medicinal value. Now, King's American Dispensatory of 1898 just speaks of Verbena or Vervain in general. It says that Vervain is indigenous to the United States, growing along roadsides and dry grassy fields, flowering from June to September. The root part is used as woody and fibrous, faintly odorous, and somewhat bitter, somewhat astringent, but would give one a nauseous taste. It means sort of the emetic kind of thing, and imparts its properties to water, so it could be used as infusion or decoction. Sometimes the leaves are used instead of the root, but they are less active. Under medicinal uses and doses, they say Vervain is tonic, emetic, expectorant, and sudorific. In small doses, a tincture of verbena relieves gastric irritation. So they're using Vervain and verbena here interchangeably. As an emetic and sudorific, it has proved beneficial in intermittent fevers, given in a warm infusion or as a powder. In all cases of colds and obstructed menstruation, it may be used as sudorific. Taken cold, the infusion forms a good tonic in some cases of debility, anorexia, and during convalescence from acute diseases. It has been reputed valuable in scrofula, visceral obstructions, gravel, and worms. The following application has been recommended as effectual in promoting the absorption of blood effused in bruises and in allaying the attendant pain. Take of vervain, senna, and white pepper, each of equal parts. Make a cataplasm by mixing with the white of eggs and apply to the bruise, and it helps with bruise. Now, they mention a related species. That there are several species of verbena, such as the Verbena urticafolia, Linnae or nettle leaf vervain with white flowers, Verbena officinalis, which, as far as I know, that one was brought over from Europe, with the blue flowers, the roots of which possess similar properties but in mild degree than the Verbena hastata. So that's the one the Thomsonians and the eclectics were using. So they said that the officinalis, which you can get seeds for in a catalog, was similar but milder than the hastata. The root of, and it gives the same cure for poison sumac. Getting up to, I guess, 1950s, 1940s, Jethro Kloss said he used the entire plant, and he did not differentiate which verbena he used, but he said medicinal properties: tonic, sudorific, expectorant, vulnerary, emetic, nervine, emmenagogue, and vermifuge. He said, under description of use, Vervain is one of the most wonderful gifts of God for healing a variety of diseases. The herb should be in every home, ready for use immediately when needed. Very powerful to produce profuse perspiration, excellent in fevers, will often cure colds overnight. Take a warm cup of Vervain tea often. It is an excellent remedy for whooping cough, pneumonia, consumption, asthma, ague, and will expel phlegm from the throat and chest. In fevers, take a cup of hot tea every hour, good in all female troubles, will increase menstrual flow. Well, I guess not in all female troubles, because sometimes you don't want to increase menstrual flow, but anyway. Also good in scrofula and skin diseases, will often expel worms, and when everything else fails, take freely until the worms pass. Very useful in nervous delirium, epilepsy, insanity, sleeplessness, and nervous headache. Will tone up the system during convalescence from heart disease. Will remove obstructions of the bowels, colon, and bladder. Good in stomach troubles, shortness of breath, and wheezing. Used in combination with equal parts of smartweed and peppermint leaves. It is excellent for appendicitis, in fevers, used in combination with boneset, willow bark, or water pepper. The tea is very healing when applied to external sores. Much better than quinine for the purposes for which quinine is used. So he thought it was better for quinine than quinine for malarial fevers. Take 1/2 to 1 teaspoonful of the fluid extract in water. Now getting up to modern use, Botany in a Day tells us that medicinally, and again, they just say vervain or verbena, medicinally is sedative, diuretic, diaphoretic, antispasmodic, and a bitter tonic. The tea is considered an ideal treatment at the beginning of a virus cold to remove the symptoms. It is also used to settle the stomach. The tea is bitter, and too much can cause nausea and vomiting. Verbena is also listed as astringent and as a lactose stimulant, so what we would call a galactagogue, increases mother's milk. So, very, very useful plant. Many varieties of it. I tried to stick mainly with the American varieties. I have a whole chapter, I believe, in my book on bitter herbs on the European varieties, so didn't want to overlap too much here. Do check to see what grows in your area, and check it to see how it might be used. It is actually extremely useful herb. If anything like COVID comes around again, we're going to want to have mints. We're going to want to have verbena. We're going to want to have boneset. We're going to want to have some substitutes for quinine, which I talk about quite a bit, from tree barks to various herbs. These are really good to know. Really, really good to know. So y'all, I'm going to wrap it up here. I hope you have an absolutely wonderful week. And if it's too late in your area to get fresh mint, go get some dried mint and try that eggplant parmesan recipe. It's really, really good. I am not kidding. And in fact, I am absolutely craving it right now. I was actually planning spaghetti for dinner, so I've already made the sauce. I may have to just run down the store and see if I can find a couple of eggplants and some motts and see what I can come up with. Anyway, y'all, have a good one, and I'll talk to you next time.
The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, for your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.